It was an ordinary morning on Earth when the unthinkable happened. The news spread like wildfire across every news network, every social media platform, and every communication system. The Sci-Fi, an alien race that had conquered countless civilizations across the galaxy, declared war on humanity. No one knew why, and no one was prepared for it. Humanity had never faced an enemy like this before. The announcement came in the form of a broadcast from the Sci-Fi leader, High Commander Orcs. His words were cold and emotionless, transmitted in every language on Earth. The broadcast began with a simple but chilling statement. Humanity, your time has come. Zorax claimed that the Sci-Fi had been monitoring Earth's technological progress for years and had decided that humanity's rapid advancements posed a threat to their empire. He gave humanity an ultimatum: surrender or face complete destruction. Humanity's leaders were stunned. World governments scrambled to understand the true meaning of this declaration. How had the Sci-Fi discovered Earth? How had they learned of humanity's existence? And most importantly, how could humans defend themselves against an empire that had wiped out entire species without mercy? The Sci-Fi were not just any ordinary alien race. They were ancient, their technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. Their fleet of ships was said to be capable of wiping out entire planets in seconds. And their weapons, no one truly knew the full extent of their power. To make matters worse, their reputation for cruelty was legendary. The few alien species who had dared to challenge the Sci-Fi were either wiped out or absorbed into their vast empire. In response to the broadcast, humanity's leaders gathered for an emergency meeting. The United Nations, along with military leaders from every nation, convened in a hidden underground bunker deep beneath the surface of Earth. There they discussed what to do next. The situation was dire. There were no signs that the Sci-Fi fleet was bluffing. The weapons they claimed to have could end Earth's existence in mere hours. The meeting was filled with tension, fear, and uncertainty. General Marcus Hayes, one of Earth's top military leaders, spoke first. We need to prepare for the worst. If they have the power they claim, our military defenses won't be enough to stop them. We'll have to use everything we have, every resource, every nation. But we must be quick, or we won't survive. But there was one voice that stood out from the others. Dr. Elena Mayweather, a reclusive scientist, had been working on an ancient project for years. She had been studying old Earth technology, forgotten and abandoned for centuries. She was quiet, often ignored in the larger meetings, but she had an idea. A solution, if only they would listen. I may have a way, Dr. Mayweather said, her voice calm yet filled with conviction. Everyone turned to her, skeptical but desperate for any hope. She explained her theory. There was a piece of forgotten technology buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. It was an ancient relic from a long-lost civilization that had been wiped out by an unknown force long before humanity existed. Dr. Mayweather believed that this technology, though old, could be the key to defeating the Sci-Fi. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense, but it was something far more powerful, an energy source capable of disrupting even the most advanced technology. Her idea seemed impossible, but the desperation in the room was palpable. What else did they have to lose? The meeting was cut short, and General Hayes made a decision. The search for this ancient technology would begin immediately. Dr. Mayweather would lead the team, and every resource at their disposal would be used to excavate and activate this mysterious weapon. As the world watched, governments scrambled to prepare their defenses. People everywhere feared the worst, some taking shelter, others frantically evacuating cities. Panic spread across the globe as the Sci-Fi fleet drew nearer. The skies above Earth were filled with rumors of strange ships and flashing lights. But still, no one truly knew when the attack would begin. In the midst of this chaos, Dr. Mayweather and her team began their excavation. They worked around the clock, uncovering the ancient vault beneath the Earth's surface. Time was running out. The Sci-Fi fleet was approaching. No one could say for sure how much longer they had before the first wave of destruction would fall. The world held its breath, unsure of what would happen next. Would the ancient technology work? Would humanity be able to fight back against an enemy that had already conquered so many? Or would Earth fall like so many other planets before it? The answers were still unknown. But one thing was clear. The war had only just begun, and humanity's future would be decided in the coming hours, as the world held its breath, waiting for an attack that could end everything. Dr. Elena Mayweather and her team of scientists worked tirelessly in secret. The excavation of the ancient technology was underway deep beneath the Earth's surface, in a remote facility that had been hidden for centuries. Dr. Mayweather had dedicated years of her life to studying old Earth relics, but never had she expected that her research would be the key to humanity's survival. The team was a mix of brilliant minds, archaeologists, engineers, physicists, who had all come together with one shared goal: to unlock the power of the ancient artifact. But the task was far from simple. The technology they were uncovering was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Its purpose was unclear, and its design was so advanced that it almost seemed out of place, as though it had been built by a civilization far ahead of humanity's own. It was buried in layers of rock, protected by complex mechanisms that had stood the test of time. But Dr. Mayweather's team had managed to break through, and now they were about to learn what it could do. "What do we have so far?" Dr. Mayweather asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The clock was ticking. They had no idea when the Sci-Fi fleet would strike, but they couldn't afford to waste any time. Earth needed a miracle, and this technology, whatever it was, could be that miracle. Her lead engineer, Samuel Brooks, wiped the sweat from his brow as he checked the latest readings from the device they had uncovered. "The readings are strange, Elena. It's definitely not from any known Earth civilization. This thing, it's like a battery, but on a scale we've never seen. It's drawing energy from the Earth's core itself, using a kind of resonance that no one has ever discovered before." Dr. Mayweather nodded. This was the breakthrough she had hoped for. The device wasn't just a weapon, it was a power source, a massive one. The artifact, once activated, would allow Earth to tap into the planet's natural energy in ways that would make current technology obsolete. It wasn't about fighting fire with fire. It was about using something that Sci-Fi wouldn't even understand. "Can we use it to disrupt their fleet?" Dr. Mayweather asked, her eyes scanning the screens in front of her. Her team had only a vague understanding of the technology's full capabilities. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something far more complicated, but she had faith that they could figure it out in time. "We might be able to," Brooks said cautiously. "If we can channel its power properly, it could interfere with the Sci-Fi's advanced weaponry. Their ships, their communication systems, we might be able to disable them before they even get close." It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. As Dr. Mayweather listened to her team's progress, her thoughts raced. The Sci-Fi were coming. They were unstoppable, seemingly invincible. Humanity was outmatched, outnumbered, and outgunned. But there was something else. The Sci-Fi had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and survive. They thought Earth would fall easily, that its people would be no different from the countless other civilizations they had destroyed. But humans weren't like the others. They were resourceful, resilient, and driven by a desire to survive that no other species could match. Meanwhile, General Marcus Hayes was overseeing the military's preparations. Earth's defenses, though not advanced enough to stand up to the Sci-Fi directly, were being strengthened in every way possible. Soldiers trained in the use of conventional weapons, while others worked to implement Dr. Mayweather's discoveries. Everyone knew that this would be their final stand, and they would give everything to protect their home. But even as they prepared, the shadow of the Sci-Fi fleet loomed closer. Their ships, massive and powerful, were nearing Earth's atmosphere. It was impossible to ignore the fear that rippled through the population. News broadcasts showed images of the alien fleet, their sleek, imposing ships ready to strike. The people of Earth weren't used to such fear. Humanity had faced challenges before, but none of them had ever seemed so hopeless. Then, as the countdown to the Sci-Fi's arrival continued, Dr. Mayweather's team made a breakthrough. The ancient technology was working. They had managed to power up the device enough to create a small pulse, a tiny fraction of what it was capable of. But the results were immediate and surprising. Across the world, there were sudden disturbances in the Sci-Fi's communications. Their ships, which had been broadcasting messages of superiority and victory, suddenly went silent. Earth's sensors, tuned to detect even the slightest signal, picked up a strange interference coming from deep within the planet. It was as if something had cut off the Sci-Fi's ability to communicate with their fleet. "It's working," Dr. Mayweather whispered to herself, a sense of cautious hope filling her chest. For the first time in days, humanity had a glimmer of hope. The Sci-Fi might not have been aware of this new power yet, but Earth was beginning to turn the tide. Dr. Mayweather knew they still had a long way to go, but the first step had been taken. They weren't going to just roll over. They were going to fight. And with this new technology, they might have just found the edge they needed to survive. Now, all they had to do was hope that the Sci-Fi wouldn't figure it out before it was too late. The first sign that the Sci-Fi had noticed something was wrong came when their communication network went silent. Across Earth, every screen that had been broadcasting the Sci-Fi's victory messages flickered and went dark. The sudden interference sent a wave of panic across Earth's military command. The countdown to the invasion was still ticking, but something had changed. The Sci-Fi were no longer the ones in control. For the first time in days, humanity had the upper hand. General Marcus Hayes paced back and forth in the command center. The disruption in the Sci-Fi's communications was only the beginning. Earth's military forces had no idea how much time they had or what the Sci-Fi would do next. All they knew was that the enemy had been caught off guard, and that was enough to give them hope. "We've got to move fast," General Hayes said, his voice filled with urgency. "This is our chance. We can't waste it." He turned to the team of military strategists gathered around him. "Start coordinating with Dr. Mayweather's team. We need that technology online. Now, if it can jam their communications, maybe it can also disable their ships." Across the world, military forces were mobilizing. Planes took to the sky, ships set sail, and soldiers prepared for what would surely be a final battle. But even as Earth's forces rallied, the Sci-Fi weren't idle. Their fleet continued to approach, and their retaliation was swift. At the heart of the Sci-Fi fleet, High Commander Zorax stood in his command ship, staring at the screens in front of him. He had been expecting Earth to fall easily. Their weapons were primitive compared to his own people's, their defenses laughable. But now, something had gone wrong. Their communications had been disrupted, and their fleet was no longer operating as smoothly as before. "What is happening?" Zorax demanded, his voice cold and demanding. He turned to his chief engineer, a Sci-Fi officer named Coulter. "Explain this." Coulter quickly examined the data, his long, thin fingers flying across the holographic interface. "There's an unknown signal coming from the planet, Commander. It appears to be emanating from deep within the Earth. We believe it's some kind of energy disruption." Zorax's eyes narrowed. Earth was a primitive world, yet it had managed to fight back in ways he hadn't anticipated. He clenched his fists in frustration. "Activate the secondary communication network. We need to regain control before the situation escalates further." But despite their efforts, the interference continued. And as Earth's forces began to coordinate more effectively, the Sci-Fi fleet started to experience strange malfunctions. Their navigation systems flickered. Weapons systems failed to activate. For a moment, the Sci-Fi were no longer the well-oiled machine they had once been. Instead, they were facing a new kind of enemy, one that had learned how to fight back. Back on Earth, Dr. Mayweather's team continued to work around the clock. They had managed to stabilize the ancient technology enough to amplify the pulse. The device had the power to send out a signal so strong that it could disrupt the Sci-Fi's most advanced systems, but they had only tested it in small bursts. Now, it was time to see if it could be used on a larger scale. "We're ready," Dr. Mayweather said, standing beside a massive control panel that connected the ancient device to Earth's communications grid. "If this works, we might be able to disable their entire fleet. But it's going to take everything we've got." The team held their breath as the final sequence was initiated. The energy from the ancient artifact flowed through the system, and a powerful signal rippled outward, heading straight for the Sci-Fi ships. For a few tense moments, there was nothing. Then, the screens in front of Dr. Mayweather and her team lit up with a series of alerts. The signal was having an effect. The Sci-Fi fleet, already disoriented by the earlier disruption, was now in chaos. Their ships were losing power. Their systems were failing one by one. "We've done it," Samuel Brooks shouted, unable to hide the excitement in his voice. But just as Dr. Mayweather allowed herself a moment of relief, a new alarm sounded. It wasn't from the Sci-Fi fleet this time. It was from Earth's own defense systems. "General Hayes, we've detected a new weapon," a technician shouted over the comms. "It's coming from the Sci-Fi flagship." General Hayes' heart skipped a beat. He knew that the Sci-Fi wouldn't take their sudden vulnerability lying down. If they had a countermeasure, they would use it now. "Activate all shields," he ordered. "Prepare for incoming fire." The skies above Earth were filled with the sound of scrambling jets and the hum of defensive systems activating. Earth had its own weapons, but they were no match for the Sci-Fi's advanced technology. The countdown to the invasion had nearly expired. And yet, even now, humanity was still standing, still fighting back. As the Sci-Fi flagship unleashed a powerful beam of energy, it was clear that the battle for Earth was far from over. Dr. Mayweather's technology had given Earth a fighting chance, but the Sci-Fi were relentless. With every passing second, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. This was no longer a war about technology or resources. It was a war of will, a war of survival. And humanity, for the first time in history, was showing that it would not go down without a fight. The real battle was just beginning. The skies above Earth darkened as the massive Sci-Fi flagship hovered ominously in the atmosphere. Its powerful weapons were now fully activated, and the global defense systems struggled to keep up. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath as humanity's last stand began. General Marcus Hayes stood at the heart of Earth's command center, his eyes fixed on the massive screen in front of him. The Sci-Fi flagship was closing in, and its energy weapons were charging. The force field around Earth's main cities had been activated, but the general knew it wouldn't last long against the Sci-Fi's superior firepower. The countdown to total destruction was almost at zero. "We need to buy more time," General Hayes muttered under his breath. "If we can hold them off for just a little longer, maybe Dr. Mayweather's team can do something else. They've got one shot, and we can't afford to let them waste it." In the heart of the underground facility, Dr. Mayweather was still working furiously with her team. The ancient artifact was showing signs of power, but it wasn't enough to stop the Sci-Fi's assault. They needed more time to perfect the technology, to turn it into a weapon that could not just disrupt but completely incapacitate the Sci-Fi fleet. "We're close, just a few more tweaks," Dr. Mayweather said, her voice filled with determination. "We've proven the technology can interfere with their systems, but we need to take it further. We need to overload their weapons. If we can target the flagship, we might just be able to stop them in their tracks." Her team nodded in agreement, though their exhaustion was evident. They had worked nonstop for days, but now the pressure was at its peak. Every moment counted. Meanwhile, the Sci-Fi flagship fired a pulse of energy, and a brilliant beam of light shot toward Earth's largest defense shield. The shield shimmered under the attack, but the energy beam was too powerful. A loud crack echoed through the command center as the shield started to buckle. People scrambled to adjust the defense systems, but it was clear that the next hit might be the final one. "General, the shield won't hold much longer," one of the technicians shouted. Hayes clenched his jaw. They were running out of options. The Sci-Fi were relentless, their weapons more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. If they couldn't stop the flagship, the planet's defenses would collapse. And then, there would be nothing left to protect Earth. Just as hope seemed to be fading, a voice came through the communication system. It was Dr. Mayweather. "General Hayes, we have a new plan. We can activate the artifact and direct its power to target the flagship's weapon systems. It's risky, but it's our only chance. If we do this, it will overload their power grid and disable their energy beams. It will take everything we've got, but it's possible." Hayes' heart skipped a beat. This was the moment. He had no choice but to trust Dr. Mayweather and her team. The future of humanity rested on their hands. "Do it," he commanded, his voice steady despite the fear rising in his chest. "We're running out of time." Back at the underground facility, Dr. Mayweather's team worked quickly to link the ancient artifact to Earth's defense systems. The device was a mystery, still not fully understood, but it was clear that it held a power unlike anything they had ever encountered. If they could harness its energy just right, it might be able to stop the Scifi in their tracks. "We're ready to fire," Brooks called out, his fingers moving rapidly across the controls. "Once we initiate the pulse, there's no turning back." Dr. Mayweather nodded. The risks were enormous, but they had no other choice. If they failed, Earth would be destroyed. But if they succeeded, they would prove that humanity's determination and ingenuity were stronger than the might of the Sci-Fi. "Fire it," she said firmly. The ground trembled as the ancient device powered up. A brilliant beam of energy shot from the device and arced toward the Sci-Fi flagship. The light was blinding, and for a moment, it seemed as though everything had stopped. On the Sci-Fi flagship, High Commander Zorax watched in disbelief as the energy beam made contact with their ship. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, the flagship's powerful weapon systems flickered and shut down completely. The once mighty fleet that had been poised to obliterate Earth was now paralyzed. "Impossible," Zorax shouted, his voice filled with fury. "What have they done?" The flagship's engines sputtered and died, leaving it floating aimlessly in space. The once imposing Sci-Fi fleet, whose ships were far superior to anything Earth could have hoped to build, was now nothing more than a crippled mass of metal. The tide had turned. General Hayes watched in awe as the screens in the command center showed the collapse of the Sci-Fi's offensive. The energy beam had worked. The Sci-Fi flagship was disabled, and their entire fleet was in disarray. "This is it," Hayes whispered to himself. "We've done it." Back in the underground facility, Dr. Mayweather and her team exchanged exhausted but triumphant glances. They had succeeded. The artifact's power had been harnessed, and it had stopped the Sci-Fi in their tracks. But there was no time to celebrate. They knew the war wasn't over yet. The Sci-Fi would come back, and humanity would need to be ready. But for the first time in days, Earth had a real chance of survival. The Sci-Fi had underestimated humanity. They thought they could crush Earth easily, but they were wrong. This battle, however, was just the beginning. The moment the Sci-Fi flagship's weapons went silent, a cheer erupted in Earth's command centers. General Hayes stood there, staring at the screen, trying to process the sudden change. For the first time in days, humanity had a real chance to push back. The seemingly unstoppable alien force was now immobilized, but General Hayes knew this was far from over. The Sci-Fi were not a species that would give up easily. They would regroup, adapt, and come back stronger. He could feel the weight of the next decisions pressing down on him. "General, what's our next move?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Commander Ana Vega, his second in command. Hayes took a deep breath, turning to her. "We keep the pressure on them. This isn't over yet. We've disabled their fleet for now, but they'll find a way to fight back. We need to prepare for the next wave." Anna nodded, but there was something in her eyes, something that suggested she understood just how much was at stake. As Earth's forces scrambled to reassemble their defensive systems, General Hayes sent out orders to keep the pressure on. The Sci-Fi were a resourceful and dangerous enemy. The battle so far had been won, but the war was far from finished. Far above Earth, the Sci-Fi flagship floated motionless in space. The once mighty vessel, brimming with advanced technology and alien power, was now a shadow of its former self. On board, High Commander Zorax seethed in anger. His fleet, which had been poised to overwhelm Earth in days, was now crippled. They had underestimated the humans, underestimated their ingenuity and resilience. How could this happen? Zorax hissed, pacing in his command chamber. His engineers scrambled to restore systems, but progress was slow. The energy pulse. It disabled our systems. We cannot restore full power until we analyze the source. Coulter, his chief engineer, reported nervously. We need more time. Zorax's eyes narrowed. Time is something we no longer have. The humans will strike soon. We must act quickly, or this entire campaign will be lost. He slammed his fist onto the console. Prepare the backup fleet. We must make Earth regret defying us. Once we regain power, we will crush them. The Sci-Fi were far from defeated, and Zorax knew their fleet wasn't the only weapon at their disposal. They had other means of attack, more brutal, more relentless. Earth had fought back, but the Sci-Fi were still a force to be reckoned with. Back on Earth, the world was on edge. Humanity had caught a break, but it was clear they weren't out of danger. News stations broadcasted the success, but every person knew the real battle was still ahead. Across the globe, military leaders held emergency meetings. Earth had won one round, but the Sci-Fi were preparing for a counterattack. Dr. Mayweather and her team worked tirelessly to refine the artifact's technology. The pulse had worked once, but they needed a backup plan. They couldn't rely solely on the artifact. They had to understand its power better and find a way to harness it more efficiently. The technology is unlike anything we've ever seen, Dr. Mayweather said as she ran diagnostics on the device. It's not just disrupting their systems, it's tapping into something deeper, something we don't yet understand. If we can perfect it, it might give us the edge we need to finish this. Her team nodded, determined but exhausted. They knew time was against them. As the sun set over the world's cities, the calm after the storm began to fade. Earth's military forces readied themselves for what was to come. General Hayes stood in the command center, watching the map of the Sci-Fi fleet. The ships that had been immobilized were beginning to show signs of movement again. They were regaining power. They're coming, Hayes muttered to himself. His voice was steady, but there was a hardness in it now. The fight had shifted. Earth had proven it could hold its ground, but the next wave would be far more intense. The world's military alliances were strong, but the Sci-Fi had the upper hand in technology. Humanity's only hope was their will to survive and adapt faster than the Sci-Fi could evolve. We'll need all our forces in position, Hayes continued. I want every defense system up and running. If they come at us again, we hit them harder. At the same time, across the ocean, Earth's elite forces prepared their counterattack. Fighter jets lined up on runways. Tanks rolled out of military bases. The world's best scientists, engineers, and soldiers worked together, knowing that they were up against an enemy who had already underestimated them once. This time, they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The Sci-Fi fleet finally regained full power, and the first wave of ships launched from the flagship's bay. They glided toward Earth, a deadly storm of alien technology and battle-hardened forces. Zorax was confident that the humans had no chance of stopping them this time. The element of surprise had been lost, but the Sci-Fi had the strength to crush them in one final blow. However, Zorax didn't anticipate the strength of the human response. As the Sci-Fi ships approached Earth's atmosphere, they were met with a barrage of anti-aircraft missiles and laser beams from Earth's defense satellites. The skies lit up as humanity's forces engaged, but the battle was far from one-sided. The Sci-Fi ships were powerful, but Earth's combined technology had grown rapidly since the first assault. The fight was more even than anyone had predicted. "Prepare the second wave," Zorax ordered. "We will crush them now." But as the Sci-Fi unleashed their deadly forces, they didn't realize that humanity's resolve had already hardened. The first wave had failed. Now, Earth was ready. General Hayes, Dr. Mayweather, and all of Earth's military and scientific forces knew that they had one final chance to turn the tide. They couldn't afford to lose this time. The fate of the entire world was on the line, and humanity would fight with everything they had. The final battle was about to begin. The skies above Earth had become a battlefield, filled with flashing lights, explosions, and the sound of intense combat. The Sci-Fi fleet had unleashed everything they had, confident that they would crush humanity once and for all. However, General Hayes stood firm, watching the battle unfold on the screens before him. His hands tightened on the armrests of his command chair, but his face remained calm. The situation was dire, but there was hope. The human forces were scattered across the globe, defending their cities and military installations, but the Sci-Fi ships were relentless. They had advanced technology and firepower far superior to anything Earth had. It seemed like Earth's forces might be overwhelmed at any moment. "We can't hold them off much longer, sir," Commander Vega reported. "They'd broken through our defenses in several places." Hayes nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I know, but we're not done yet. We've trained for this moment. Earth may be outmatched, but we've learned to fight differently. We'll make them regret underestimating us." In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Mayweather was working frantically in her lab. The artifact, humanity's last hope, had to be perfected. If they could figure out how to use it to its full potential, they might stand a chance against the Sci-Fi. But the pressure was mounting. The Sci-Fi were closing in, and time was running out. Come on," Dr. Mayweather muttered to herself as she examined the alien device on her workbench. It was unlike anything Earth had ever seen, and she had spent countless hours studying it. The pulse it emitted had damaged the Sci-Fi fleet, but they were adapting quickly. She needed to stabilize the power source and modify it to make it more reliable, but there were so many variables. Could it work again? Could it turn the tide of the war? She glanced at her team, who were working just as tirelessly. They knew the stakes. The future of Earth depended on their success. On the battlefield, the human forces were pushing back with all their might, but the Sci-Fi were relentless. The alien ships, sleek and deadly, rained down lasers and missiles, tearing through Earth's defenses. Fighter jets zipped through the sky, trying to evade the Sci-Fi's deadly blasts. Each explosion felt like a punch to the gut, each loss a reminder of the stakes they were fighting for. "We need backup," one of the pilots shouted into his comm system as his fighter was damaged. "We're getting hit from all sides." General Hayes watched the feed from Earth's military network, his jaw set in determination. His strategy had been to draw the Sci-Fi in and keep them engaged long enough for Dr. Mayweather and her team to perfect the artifact. Now, it seemed like the last-ditch effort might be humanity's only chance. "Status report," Hayes ordered. Commander Vega glanced at the screen. "We've lost 2 bases, and multiple fighters have gone down. The Sci-Fi are breaking through." Hayes didn't flinch. "We hold on, and we fight. Give them everything we have. We've survived against worse." In the heart of the Sci-Fi flagship, High Commander Zorax watched with frustration as his fleet struggled to subdue the human forces. He had expected victory by now, but the humans were proving to be more resilient than he had anticipated. He paced in his command center, his fists clenched tightly. "We need to finish this," Zorax growled. "The humans are more resourceful than we thought, but we cannot allow them to escape." The Sci-Fi had underestimated humanity's resolve. Their enemies had fought back against impossible odds and shown extraordinary adaptability. Zorax knew that if the humans managed to turn the tide of this battle, it would be the end of his campaign. He couldn't allow that to happen. Prepare for the final assault, Zorax ordered. This ends now. The Sci-Fi fleet began to align their forces for a concentrated attack on Earth's remaining defenses. They knew that this final strike had to break the humans' will to fight, or all would be lost. Back on Earth, the pressure was mounting. The cities that still stood were under constant attack, and the military was stretched thin. People everywhere were coming together, doing whatever they could to help. Civilians were working alongside soldiers, offering food, shelter, and medical aid to those in need. It was a global effort, a testament to humanity's ability to unite in the face of overwhelming adversity. In a command center deep underground, General Hayes received an urgent message from Dr. Mayweather. "We're ready," she said, her voice tight with excitement and exhaustion. "The artifact is stable. We've modified it to deliver a more powerful pulse. If we can direct it at the Sci-Fi flagship, we might be able to disable their entire fleet." Hayes' heart raced. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. They had one shot at this. "Get it to the launch site," he ordered. "We need to hit them hard. We don't have any time to waste." With the artifact now in place, Dr. Mayweather and her team activated the device. The energy began to build, a brilliant light filling the room as the pulse intensified. This was humanity's last chance to strike a decisive blow against the Sci-Fi. As the pulse surged into the air, aimed directly at the Sci-Fi flagship, a wave of energy crackled through space. For a moment, it felt as though time stood still. The remaining Sci-Fi ships fought valiantly, but their numbers were too few, and their systems too damaged. The human fleet, unified and relentless, overwhelmed them. Fighter jets shot down alien craft with laser accuracy, while bombers targeted the Sci-Fi's remaining strongholds. Earth's forces fought with everything they had, fueled by the belief that they had something worth protecting. The tide had turned. Hours passed, and the once threatening Sci-Fi fleet was reduced to debris scattered across the stars. Earth's forces had fought back the invasion, and they had won. But the cost had been high. Many lives had been lost in the battle, and the damage to Earth's cities was significant. Yet, humanity had survived. General Hayes stood in silence, watching the final remnants of the Sci-Fi fleet burn up in the atmosphere. The stars seemed to shine brighter now, as though reflecting the victory of humankind. But Hayes knew that this victory was not just about the battle. It was about the resilience, the unity, and the unwavering spirit of humanity. "We did it," Hayes said quietly. "We're still here." Commander Vega, who had been by his side throughout the war, nodded. "We'll rebuild. We always do." The war had ended, and Earth had proven that even against overwhelming odds, humanity could rise to the challenge. The Sci-Fi may have underestimated humans, but now they knew better, and humanity had learned something too. They were stronger than they had ever imagined. The battle was over, but the work to rebuild had just begun. And as long as humanity stood united, there would always be hope for the future.